Welcome back. You're still watching Business Morning on Channels Television. As I said at the beginning of the program, today our conversation is going to be focused on the recent IMF Article 4 consultation report on the Nigerian economy. And I'm being joined on the program by an economist and the managing director of Big Consultancy Services, Dr. Boniface Chizia. Dr. Chizia, good morning and thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Harriet. Thank you for having me.
Now, this is a report that comes out annually, but let me just get your thoughts. As an economist, what are your thoughts on this annual consultations by the IMF?
Well, I think that the IMF has a responsibility. You have member countries, and so it's part of their responsibility to the member countries to do this annual visitation. It's like touching base, so they want to know more about what goes on within the economy. And so they come and they talk to some key players within the system, talk to the government, central bank, Minister of Finance, and so on and so forth. And then they talk to some other people, they collect some data, and then they go back, do some analysis, and this is passed through their board. After that, the report they adopt is sent to us. And so it's a part of, once you're part of, it's part of the responsibility we have as being members of IMF. So they do this routinely and they send their reports.
Okay, so if this is done routinely, that means, of course, whatever decisions they reach from the information that they've collated together from the CBN, the IMF, and other financial bodies that we have here that running the economy or regulating the economy, as the case may be, they should be able to give us a feedback on what areas we should work on. And when they give this feedback, are those areas actually worked on? Because it seems as if most times when this report comes out, it's almost the same thing that we see in the previous report that we see again.
Well, they give a feedback. For instance, they felt that we are being overly focused on the rate of exchange, for instance. They gave a feedback. And they thought that you have downsides if you did that, because then your reserves might be affected. So you use the reserves to defend the rate of exchange. So they thought that maybe there's a need for us to be a bit more flexible. But the focus was rigid. They talked about AMCOM. And they talked about AMCOM, that, for instance, AMCOM, it shouldn't be an institution that's going to be there permanently. And so it's there, it's supposed to be, it's a crisis resolution, we had crisis within the banking system. And so we had AMCOM. And we shouldn't adopt a perspective, that says AMCOM is going to be there perpetuity. And so you can see that when they came and left, there was this debate and argument, whether in fact AMCOM should be phased out in 10 years or in 7 years and so on and so forth. AMCOM is saying that we're going to be there and so on, and we're part of the architecture, financial architecture, and so on and so forth. So they do raise issues, but it doesn't need to be said about their report this year. It's the fact that they're a bit upbeat. If you take what they've said, the rate of growth which they projected for our economy is even it's higher than what our Office of Statistics said it's going to be. We said 6 point something, they said 7 point something. So we're not privy to their methodology, but we would expect that they adopt the same methodology across the countries that they visit.
Okay, sorry, Dr. Chizia, let me just bring you back on that, because I'm looking at the report now, and it says that the Nigerian economy would have grown by 6.4% by the end of 2013, but the National Bureau of Statistics says the GDP growth rate was about 6.8% in the third quarter.
Okay.
And so if they're projecting 6.4% by the end of 2013, that means it's going to drop from what the National Bureau of Statistics actually put out for the third quarter.
Okay, I didn't get that. I thought that they were a bit even more orbit. I want to expect them, that would seem to align, because then that would expect them to be a bit more conservative. And so that would seem to align with what I thought I read. And so, but if they say that, you cannot quarrel with it. Because again, it depends on what approach they have adopted, in doing their projections. Sorry,
Dr. Chizia. So now let's look at the reason why they might not be upbeat about projected growth, the GDP growth. They're expecting that it to be at 6.4%. Why are they looking at that number like that? What are the variables that have determined this?
Well, if you look at the report, we all know that the growth in Nigeria comes from oil, extractive sector. And then, of course, they talked about services. When you talk of services, in fact, you're talking of Nollywood and so on and so forth, which really has been a world beater, earn us a tremendous revenue. You're talking about entertainment, music, and so on and so forth. And you talked about trade. Okay, again, that should be there. But you know, the thing is that if you're not if you're not privy, excuse me, if you're not privy to the instrument of measurement, if you don't know how they go about doing whatever they do, that's their own assessment. So we just have to live with it. Like I said, what is most important is that it cuts across. That means if they come to Nigeria or they went to Ghana, and they're going to adopt about the same methodology in trying to assess. But you know, it's a projection. And invariably, what is going to happen is that you're not going to attain that exactly. If you attain that exactly, then it's going to be coincidental. So it's a projection. They're just saying this is what it's going to be. And then and these are based on certain underlying assumptions.
Assumptions in terms of looking at, let's say, for instance, the report is expecting that Nigeria's economic growth will improve further this year, particularly since we seem to see so much activity in agriculture, trade and services. We see a further tightening of monetary policies and the rest of that. So, yes, the projection should favor us at least for this year.
Yeah, but then, for instance, we have election in view. Election comes in 2015. And then there's going to be lots of money being pumped into the system, and even the dollar and so on and so forth is going to be more or less become the medium of exchange, because when you want to do all this, pay all these monies that you pay that are not paid across the table, for instance, it's easier to carry dollars, to pay them. And so they do that. We don't want to expect also that they've anticipated that most of these things would happen. That pro-cyclical, that with elections coming, we have more money is being injected in the system, and that must have been factored into their calculations.
Okay, let me take you back, if I will, to what you said about what the IMF, the IMF reports about AMCON winding down and the rest of it. It says, the agency feels that AMCON isn't really necessary any longer, since banks are now aware that if they take too much of a risk, this is what's going to happen to them. And so they feel that AMCON, yes, should be wound down, but they haven't said how AMCON should wind down and at what point in time AMCON should begin to wind down. Is this...
I would expect that idea has been floated. It's for us now to go and get on the drawing board and begin to look at this and see what we can do with AMCON. We also have to take a decision as a country and say to ourselves, what really informed the setting up of AMCON. Like I said in the paper I did, my memo to Emefiele, which was published widely, that AMCON is, in fact, it's a brainchild of Soludo. So it was there in its 13-point agenda. And it just happened that Sanusi implemented it. So what is our own idea? Of course, we all know that it's a distress resolution vehicle. And so you're going to have banks, you're going to have issues with banks having bad debts, and they needed to have their balance sheet cleaned up a bit. And so we needed an institution that would have that responsibility, to take off those bad debts, from the bank, so that they can again have a clean slate, as it were, to begin to do some business. Now it's up to us to say, at one point in time, should we say that this exercise, this assignment, this objective we see for AMCON that has been carried through, is for us to decide as a nation. But the thing is that we have to ask ourselves, the argument I see coming back is that it's been said that AMCON should just be part of the architecture. It just be there. And then, of course, it has moral implications. So if you have a permanent institution that is there, so if I'm a bank and then I incur I'm reckless in booking credit. So if I book credit and it's bad, those institutions, it's been institutionalized, it's there to come and take up this money from me. Also, so there are some moral issues that we also need to look at. But I also come back and I say that we also should ask, how does it operate elsewhere? So essentially, the world is a small village today. So I think we have to find out. They've used this. We're not the first country, to put distress resolution vehicles such as AMCON in place. And so we should ask ourselves, where it operated before. How was it handled? So it's very easy. So if you want to do this, you consult one country, 2, 3, and then you come and say, okay, within our system, given a particular situation.
Exactly, because I was just going to say, not all situations are the same. Yes. Other countries we all have different and peculiar situations, as the case may be. Now, in our own situation, we know that we've had a case where the banks were a little bit too reckless with customers' deposit funds, with deposits, and we saw what happened. But if, for instance, AMCON were to stay, should it operate as an entity on its own, or should it be regulated? Because that issue has actually come up. Who should regulate AMCON, especially in terms of when it wants to float bonds and the rest of it, which is what it does with, in trying to get back investors' funds and the rest of it. So who should actually be overseeing the activities of AMCON?
Well, there shouldn't be any problems about that. I should explain that Central Bank is the baby of the brainchild of Central Bank. And I suppose the Central Bank should regulate AMCON.
But you see, AMCON also goes to the capital market to carry out transactions. So that means it also should be regulated by the Securities and Exchange Commission.
Well. I think that I'm sure that could be sorted out. We have to be very careful. If SEC, it depends. If it's going to do something that has to do with overriding objective, then SEC shouldn't come in, as far as I'm concerned. I think that if it's going to operate in the capital market, then Securities and Exchange Commission will probably have to come in and say, in terms of modalities and procedures and when it can come in and how much maybe they can put in at a time. But then, if, for instance, AMCON says we are going to issue bonds and then to retire some of the liabilities we have and so on, I don't think SEC would come and say you shouldn't do that. Yes, I think that the person that could do that is that it's a decision that has to be taken consciously. I would expect that today, AMCON is not autonomous within the system. We just had an argument whether the central bank is autonomous. It cannot be autonomous. I have not looked at the act itself carefully, but I would expect that AMCON should be somehow have a reporting relationship. And I would expect, if you ask me, with central bank. So central bank should be able to look at AMCON and say, look, okay, you're going to do this. And most of the things AMCON has done today, has done most of it with the guarantee of the central bank. And so central bank is in the guarantee. On the spread, the central bank should be able to have a say in terms of what goes on. So there should be a check.
So let's go back to the issue of the report now. One of the suggestions that's actually made in that report, for instance, was the need to build fiscal buffers and strengthen the framework further. Are the current policies that we have right now tilting towards that?
And that's a difficult one, because the Sovereign Wealth Fund, which we have with access to accounts, has now migrated to Sovereign Wealth Fund. The challenge they faced. I mean, the people feel the other tiers of government, lower tiers of government, feel that they don't have control over how this Sovereign Wealth Fund is being managed. But then the point is that, like I said earlier on, that you don't have, there aren't too many oil producing countries in this world that do not have this sort of fund. If you put it in context, what is this really meant to do? What it's meant to do is that you do a budget, and then you do a budget based on the benchmark. And so all the calculations are based on the benchmark that says oil is going to be sold at, is it 77 or 78?
Sorry, 78, 77.9.
9, okay,
yes.
Per barrel. You did that. And oil is now selling for 100 and something. It's sold for 100 and something since the last 1 year. What's happened in the past is that this money that comes in excess of what is budgeted for just goes into the system, and it's not being appropriated, and it's not being spent. And essentially, what happens is that this money was being carried out, was being misapplied. Okay, and so now we say, look, okay, any monies that we earn in excess of what the benchmark, let's try and warehouse this money. Let's try and sanitize it. Let's not push it into the system. Let's put it somewhere and make sure that this money is used properly. And if you look at the programs, that Sovereign Wealth Fund is supposed to, it's just like looking ahead. If you look at oil as it is a Western asset. And so we today, we filter it away. Now, those who are coming behind us, what will happen? And so Sovereign Wealth Fund, part of its major plank is to make sure that all these intergenerational issues, that it tries to accommodate. And so you have investments in infrastructure, you have investments that will look ahead to the future, so you begin to look at areas where we can also expand this economy, and there are lots of things, It's just something like liquefied natural gas and so on and so forth. There are areas where we need investments that would broaden the base of this
Dr. Chizia, let's catch our breath, and when we come back, we'll continue this conversation. Now, we're still going to be talking about, in future, what we should be doing, especially as regards oil production and oil losses and oil theft and the rest of it. Some people are advocating that now is the time for the petroleum industry bill to actually be passed. We'll talk about that in just a minute. You're still watching Business Morning on Channels TV, and we're broadcasting live from Lagos. When we come back, we'll continue this conversation.